They flew me for an offsite when I had already left the project from KL to Greece for a 2-day offsite and back. And that was it. I'm like, this is not, I don't know if I really should do this.
Thank you for joining us back for the second part of Mehul's interview, where we will discuss his life as a management consultant and venture capitalist. In case you missed the first part, link to the video is in the description box below. So Mehul, again, glad to have you with us.
Good to be back.
So you spent over 7 years at IIT Kearney. Could you tell us more about your experience at the firm and how did your work and focus change when you returned post MBA?
Yeah, sure. I mean, IIT Kearney is a general management consulting firm. It's not a boutique consulting firm. So it focuses on a lot of different sectors. My focus largely was on telecom and consumer goods, which really helped me a lot because typically you will see that consumer goods and telecom are fairly international and broad topics. So if you are working on telecom, you can easily go to any other country and work on telecom, and the same principles apply. The state of evolution is almost the same. Almost everyone's now on 4G, trying to move towards 5G. Same with consumer goods. Consumers, you can feel some subtle differences between developed countries and developing countries, but the way you analyze and way you recommend solutions are largely the same, even on the cost side. Obviously, you innovate and you're smart enough to innovate for that particular context, but they're very exportable skills, transferable skills, as some people call it, and that really helped me. So I did projects in Australia, Malaysia, Singapore, US, Dubai, Switzerland as well. So a huge amount of multinational exposure that also helped me get into INSEAD. I think INSEAD places a lot of emphasis on international experience. And as a management consultant, I think the biggest thing that people look for early in their career is breadth of experience. So you work on operations, you work on strategy, you work in a big telecom firm, you work with a medium-sized consumer goods or retail chain. This is something you will not get in any other company. Very few roles actually give you this breadth, and what it helps you do is to be able to decide what really excites you and what makes you happy, and you can choose a kind of career path which is suited to it. The other thing it does is it gives you access to CEOs and CXOs and puts you in situations where you have to show your maturity and your confidence. And that is again something very difficult in any other role. And I would suggest people to actually go for management consulting early in their career. And these two things are very, very powerful in helping you build your career and confidence, etc. So that was a great time. When I went to INSEAD, I was a senior analyst. So a large part of my role was taking in data, analyzing, coming up with recommendations, and actually convincing not the senior most stakeholders, but very senior stakeholders on how to kind of go about whatever my work stream was. When you come back from an MBA, you're not really very different as a person, but you have had more experiences. You have more confidence. You have more confidence in a setting with more senior people, elder people, which you don't get in the undergrad in India, at least. Or even like we don't have a lot of undergrad jobs that people do. We don't have a lot of internships where you really are thrown in the deep. Internships are fairly straightforward in undergrad in India. So when I came back, I was on track to become manager. So I came back as associate, and within 2 years, I was going to be manager. And then you're expected to lead people. You're expected to lead a team. You have to balance the expectations of the team, the client, the partners, and principals. It's more interpersonal a role than your analytical skills. Like you have to make sure that you're not making the team work too hard. You're not doing things that are not required. The prioritization is very important. You have to learn how to say no to people, to the client, to the partners and principals, to the team. A very different set of skills. It might look like it's very analytical as a role, but a manager role is actually way less analytical. If you have a good analyst on the team, you actually don't even need to be very analytical. You have to know what questions to ask, and you have to know when to put a stop to a stream of work that's going on, and you have to have the confidence to tell your client that this is the right thing, even though you're younger. Again, I would really suggest people who are getting into it to not address their age, not try to feel like they need to address their young age to senior and stakeholders. If you're talking sense in your content, most of your clients will be very respectful of what you have to say.
Uh,
I believe I answered the question. I'm not sure if I missed
yeah,
something in the.
it's perfect. So, Mehul, earlier you mentioned how international your work was, despite the fact that you were based out of only one country, that was India.
Yeah.
You worked across geographies. And one of the reasons you attribute to it is, of course, the fact that you were more or less, you were focused on TMT and consumer. Were there any
Yeah.
other reasons how you got so many international projects?
Uh, I think the first international project is a lot of luck because you have to wait for your project to finish, and at that moment there has to be an international project which is looking for someone from uh, India or something, some location like that with some specific experience. My first international opportunity was just 9 months after I entered Kearney, and that was because I don't know for sure, but I think I have a hunch that the principal on my first project, one of the principals on my first project, was the wife of the principal on the Australian project, and I was doing fairly well on my first project, so she might have recommended me, and that's why I got the opportunity. After the first opportunity, it's all about performance. If you're really doing well and you have an international network already, you will keep getting projects. To the point that you actually have to say no, that I don't want to go international projects. I want to be in India because I've done too much travel. And at that point, you feel like it was not that great. But obviously, when you're on international projects, you have a lot of fun. And it's all about making the most of the opportunities that come your way, right? You can't make all opportunities come your way, but if something comes knocking at the door, just like go with it.
So obviously consulting was working out pretty well for you. Why would
Yeah.
you leave consulting and to go to VC?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to do something of my own. That's the biggest reason. Now there are a lot of there's a lot of time in your career to do something of your own. You do it while you are in school, college. You can do it right after you leave. You can do it after your first job, and there are lots of moments in your career when you feel like that. And I felt that I need to do something of my own, coming from a business family at some point of time. What it requires is conviction. Now, to build that conviction, you need to build a few set of, either you have to be overconfident or too confident about your own self, and that itself is conviction, and a lot of people succeed with that. But if you're not, then you have to build conviction with skills and experience. Management consulting gives you a lot of soft skills and analytical skills, but it does not give you the experience of working in a very small scale setup or a small startup or an early stage startup. And the big difference is that in consulting, the way people work is you have a problem, you know the solution to that problem in the first week, and then you spend 2 to 3 months trying to prove that your solution was correct with data and trying to convince people that your solution is correct so that they can implement it in their organization, which is very different to how startups work. Startups work, okay, this is a problem, I have a solution, let's implement it, and by implementing it, we will know whether it was right or not. And and rightly so. I mean, big corporations have a lot of risk in profits to actually protect. They can't just go ahead and implement every single thing. Uh, they're at the complete opposite end of where startups are. A lot of startups fail because they implement 10 different things and just run out of money implementing those. But that's how startup life is. And to get a feel of that, there were two ways: either join an early stage startup or join an early stage VC. An early stage VC obviously gives you the advantage that you can look at multiple startups and multiple domains within a short span of time, as opposed to joining an early stage startup, which will give you a lot of execution skills, but will not let you look at a lot of different areas. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was great, and I got an opportunity. So yeah, I put two and two together, and I landed into the VC role.
Got it. So when you talk about, so you transition from consulting into VC, right? So how can a candidate like with no VC or entrepreneurship background get into the space?
It is difficult, to be honest. It's not very easy. I was lucky because one of my distant relatives and an IIT batchmate was at the VC fund, and the VC fund was open for consulting candidates. And I had an international MBA, so kind of helps the credibility, and IIT Bombay helps the credibility. but it's not very difficult because VC opportunity, it's not very easy because the VC opportunities are not a lot. VCs are very small teams and they will hire when someone leaves or they start a new fund. And they start a new fund every few years, not every year, right? So it's not like consulting where every year they will hire 40 people and then some people will leave slowly, steadily. And it's also a very long-term career. It's people take 10 years to become a partner and then they have to start their own fund. And then after 10 years, they are able to say that they are a good venture capitalist. It takes 20 years to establish yourself as a good venture capitalist. It takes 5 years to establish yourself as a good consultant. It's a huge difference. Um, so so people don't leave. People, when they go in, they either leave very soon or they wait for their like 20 years. So it's not a very easy sector to get in. You should rely on your network. You should build your network. You should keep talking to VC funds so that they have a perception, and they need to have a perception that you're good, either through a reference or personally. If it's personal, then it's obviously great. And then if they think that you're really good, you're connected with the startup ecosystem, then whenever an opportunity comes up, they will think of you. At least you'll get to know about it. Getting an interview in a VC fund is probably harder than cracking that interview. So getting that interview in the first place is where you need to put the most work. And that's really a very slow burn kind of work. You have to talk to people, make friends, or you just wait for opportunity to come knocking at your door. And I mean, you get lucky, but yeah, I mean, if you really want to actively work towards it, then it's all about network.
So you stayed in the VC fund firm for quite some time. So what were some of the challenges that you faced, and what were some of the learnings that you had?
I actually spent like 2 years, so it's on the shorter end of time that people spend, right? I realized within the 2 years that there is a lot to learn, and I've learned most of what I wanted to learn, which is to be able to do my own startup. And that was always the overarching goal. I never had the goal of becoming a VC partner. Uh, the pros and cons of VCs are very easy to guess, right? I mean, a VC fund will invest in 5 or 6 deals. Every deal takes about 4 to 6 months to materialize. It's a investment banking meets kind of fund management type of setup where it's extremely slow. You'll not get results. Like it's extremely slow to even get to the deal, and then you have to wait 5 years to figure out whether the deal was good or not, because only after 5-6 years you'll be able to exit it. For a long time, people thought that WeWork is a great deal, and then it crashed, right? You can always have these sudden surprises. So if you're getting into VC, be ready for the slow burn. You have to be very good at selling your VC fund, because the startup that you really want to invest in will have multiple options. And if they don't have multiple options, you need to ask why you want to invest in them. So you really need to sell your VC fund, and you have to be very good interpersonally. It's very investment banking in that sense. Not the attire, because if you wear suits and ties, and startups really kind of scoff at you. But you have to blend in with the crowd. You have to like talk to entrepreneurs, get the deal done at good terms. There's a lot of negotiation that goes on. What's the valuation? Will we get a board seat? How much equity should we get? How many like what are the exit terms, etc. There's a lot to learn there as well, because as a startup founder, you need to be able to talk to VCs. You also need to be able to understand what kind of startup founder you want to be and what kind of startup you want to set up, because you will very clearly understand in a VC fund that there are a lot of startups that will be successful by your definition, but a VC will never invest in them. A startup which can get to say a 50-100 million dollars without raising funds, or with whatever, like a startup that can get to 50 to 100 million dollars, and that's the cap that it can get to. VCs are not interested. VCs want unicorns. So VCs want startups that can go to half a billion, billion, 2 billion, $10 billion. But it doesn't mean that 50 to $100 million is a small amount, right? You can have that in mind, that okay, I need to build a startup that is not VC fundable, so I need to build it with my own finances. Can I bootstrap a startup to that scale? And can I bootstrap a startup to a $2 million and live a very happy life? These are called lifestyle startups. So the VC fund also tells you a lot about whether you want to be in that game or not as a startup founder. That was huge. And also to assess what can you really do to make your startup scalable. Because a lot of times at management consulting, you're not talking about scale. You're talking about a new initiative, which is strategy, cost reduction, which is like 20%, If you're looking at growth, it's like, okay, double in 5 years. In a startup scale, it's like double every year is the kind of scale you're talking about. Very, very different metrics that you need to track, very, very different dynamics. You're not thinking of profits in the beginning. You're thinking of figuring out product market fit, which is something that you rarely work on in the consulting domain. There's a lot of things that you learn at a VC fund, but you learn most of them in the first 2 to 3 years. And then it's all about your selling skills and investment skills and have your instinct that you need to develop over the next 10 years to be able to become a good venture capital.
So you talked about developing instinct. How did you do that? Or would you have any tips around it?
Yeah, I mean, instinct is a lot about pattern recognition as well. You have to look at a lot of startups and figure out why they succeeded and why they failed. You read about it. You talk to startup founders. You talk to other venture capitalists. You talk to other investors, and you build your hypothesis that this is what has succeeded in the market. And the trend typically continues for a couple of decades. It doesn't die out in 4 or 5 years. So if you really identify a business model trend that is working, it's really good. And you learn from the partners in the VC fund because they have the hypothesis for their VC fund already when they're raising the funds, right? They will have a thought that this is the kind of startup we'll invest in. You have to understand why. And if you understand it for 15, 20 different VC funds, you will have your own mental model of what really works. The second step is the most important step. It's even more important than having that mental model is to be aware of your bias. You cannot take for granted that your mental model is really right. You have to have a control group. You have to test it with startups that meet your criteria and then watch them over a year of whether they succeed or not. And then figure out whether your mental model was correct or not. So you have to treat your confirmation bias because it's all about predicting the future. It's not about taking just trends from the past and fitting a regression curve. Right? A regression curve only works when it can predict the future accurately. So you have to test for that. So it takes you a year, 2 years to figure out, okay, this really works or this doesn't work. And then within that, you actually have to find a niche because if you are coming to an answer which everyone knows, then everyone wants to invest in them. Then you'll never get a good valuation. So yeah, I mean, you kind of have to find something, find a new insight by looking at everything that was in the past and then test it on the future.
Got it. We have one final interesting question for you. Would you have any tips for candidates who would be interested in investing money in their peers' startups while in school or afterwards? Like some of our peers are already considering starting something when they reach school.
Yeah. So typically an angel round or the first round that companies raise is called family, friends, and pools round. Okay. You're definitely not family. So I would suggest you try to be a friend rather than a fool. If you're looking at a startup for investment, even if it's a batchmate, be very honest to yourself as well as the founder. You assess the startup and very honestly tell your batchmate that this is why you are investing or this is why you're not investing, right? And only take, because it's your money. I mean, you can obviously choose to be a quote unquote fool where you just like, because he's a batchmate, I will invest money in him. And that's not a wrong decision if that makes you happy and you have enough money to spare. Fine. I mean, you can trust a person and you can trust the founder. But beyond the founder, if you want to really invest as an investment, you have to look at it as a company where you will analyze, okay, right? I mean, the founder is good. The founder has to be good. It's early stage. It's all about execution. No, I mean, if you don't believe in this person's, however good a friend he is, if you don't believe this person is a hustler and can get things executed, don't invest. And the second thing is you have to believe in what the startup is trying to do. Don't take it for granted, okay, he believes in it, so he must be right, and so I'll invest. You have to have that personal belief and you have to take onus of the investment. You can't blame it on other people that your investment didn't work out. You have to take onus of that investment and you have to kind of take responsibility that I invested with all the facts on the table and I got it right or I got it wrong. But yeah, other than that, it's your money and you do whatever you want to do with your money.
I was like, this is the first time that I'm hearing such in-depth points about how it goes, how things go on in the VC sector. So I'm really intrigued. I was lost in everything that you were saying. I was just listening to that. But yeah, so Mehul, that's the end of the questions that we have for you. But before we let you go, we have this really quick and exciting at least exciting for all viewers, and Subhamna and I, we have this really exciting rapid fire round planned for you. So if you're ready, we can get started, and you have to give us answers real quick, whatever comes to your mind.
I'll try to be as quick as possible. So yeah, let's get started.
Perfect. Question one: what is your favorite and least favorite thing about consulting?
I mean, the favorite thing is the kind of people that you work with. Really, I mean, they're pretty much at the same analytical level. You just connect very easily, and they're all smart people. It's very difficult to get that kind of peer group in any other company, right? So that has to be the favorite thing. The least favorite thing is the phase where you have to actually convince people that this is the right answer when you've proven it. And it's not a short process. Like, you have to make presentations, you have to do 10 different presentations telling the same thing over and over again. And you're like, I mean, I know this is the right answer. Just do it, guys. I've spent 1 month just trying to convince you guys that what I've done is right. It's pretty frustrating.
This is a problem with smart people. You have to just spend more time to convince them. So
yeah, I'm sure the people I'm convincing are also smart. They're not, but they just they don't have enough time to just go over it before I've told them, right? And a corporate is built on like a committee decision making process. So you have to go through everyone, and each one of them is smart. They're not. They just obviously if they had done it themselves, they might have come to the same answer and implemented it right away. It's just the process and the bureaucracy in a corporation that just frustrates you other than that.
All right. Question two: what is the most luxurious or badass experience that you have had in your career as a consultant or or in the VC sector?
Oh, it definitely has to be consulting, and I have had so many that I need to think about it.
You can tell us more than one. Actually,
Okay, I'll tell you a few. We were in. I was on a Dubai project. Okay, and that project finished, and we typically, some projects who have the budget have a project offsite, which means that you go to a nice location. And so I finished the project, and I was in Malaysia, right? And so the project offsite was planned. I didn't expect people who were on the project earlier to be invited, but they invited me, and they did the project offsite in Greece. So they flew me for an offsite when I had already left the project from KL to Greece for a 2-day offsite and back. And that was it. Like, this is not. I don't know if I really should do this. I feel bad. The other one was other one was in Australia. I was working on a Kearney project in Australia, and typically what I used to do was you get a flyback every month. You could fly back to India every month from Australia to just be at the home office. I used to take that every 2 months, and I used to travel within Australia for that budget, whatever budget you have to fly back, right? Which is a nice deal. And then one of the consultants, who was a Croatian consultant, she was there from Europe. She was getting married, and we were very good friends on the project. We had become very good friends on the project. And I was the only consultant on that project team who was invited to the wedding. And and I didn't really want to spend money actually traveling from Melbourne to Croatia. It's a 27-hour journey. So I told my partner, look, I am not going to fly back I'm not going to use one more flyback to India business class, but I want to go to Croatia because I'm the only consultant invited, and I think you should build team spirit and let me go on an economy budget, on the project budget. And he allowed us. He said, okay, go on project budget from Melbourne to Croatia. And okay, good. I didn't expect that, yes, but yeah, I mean, these are and there's a lot of luxurious hotels and stuff. But at some point, you grow kind of fed up of. I was also upgraded to first class once by Emirates, but I was so tired that I slept all through it. So, I mean, those are the good and bad side of consulting.
Clearly, those were clearly luxurious experiences for sure. Yes. So the third question: one thing that you did at INSEAD that you never thought you would do.
One thing that I did, I slept at a railway station. I really didn't think I would do that in my life.
How did that happen? How did you
end
up sleeping at the railway
It's a bit tricky. It was the INSEAD thing was done and dusted, right? It was post INSEAD. slightly post, like a week after INSEAD. We had a party in Fontainebleau. I don't know, like I think it was the last term. It was not after INSEAD. It was the last P5. We had a party in Fontainebleau, but some people had already moved to Paris to live in Paris to explore because P5 is very free. They were not living in Fontainebleau, and I was crashing at their place because I was doing some travel and I landed in Paris. So we came for the party, but the party ended around 2, right? And the first train back to Paris is at 5:30. So we're like, oh, so we walked back to the station. We slept there because we didn't want to go and sleep at someone else's place and not get a taxi and miss the first couple of trains. We're like, wow, we'll just take the first train. Let's just sleep at the. So 3 of us, and it was hilarious.
Got it. So you had like a mini party at the railway station for the.
We were too tired, man. We just like, let's just not. Let's try and sleep a couple of hours, and hopefully we'll wake up in time.
So the second last question: if you had to give one advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Take more risk. I would say I feel like I have had a very very privileged life, both like personally for sure because it comes with the background, but even professionally, I've not really explored. I spent 6 years in consulting, which is a lot. I could have taken the startup leap a little earlier. I probably should have done that. When I was in Australia, I did get a couple of calls for interviews with PE and VC funds. I could have tried that a little earlier. And this is kind of I'm probably a little more old school in practice, but in when what I feel about careers, you should be if you're not really if you haven't really explored a lot of options, you don't know what's out there. So early in your career is the best time to really explore all the options. You do consulting, you try VC, PE, finance upfront, and it's easier to get into new roles early on than it is later when you've already established your specialization. When you're known for something, you're known for finance, and you don't want to do operations, no one will let you do it, and that's one of the reasons why people do MBA as well. So that would be the advice: take more risk.
Really pertinent points there. Since you are starting a new phase in your career, how would you plan to end 2020?
With a startup that's actually showing some traction and being able to go out and walk on the streets without a mask. I guess these are the two most important things that I feel should happen by the end of 2020. I'm really hoping for that. But we'll see how it goes. I'm kind of I'm a realist who leans towards optimism a little. So yeah, one way or the other will come out of it.
Perfect. Mehul, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for chatting with us. We're certain that this conversation will be particularly helpful to our viewers. We've already told you about the number of people who are interested in the VC space. So thank you so much for sharing your opinion and your views with us.
It was my pleasure, guys. Again, thank you for having me, and good luck.
Thank you everyone for joining in. We hope you liked the episode, and if you have any recommendations or suggestions on what we could cover next, please let us know in the comment section below. And as the tradition goes, please subscribe to our channel and like and share this video with whoever you feel could benefit from it.